Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 82 of Humanity Rising. Every day since the 22nd of May, Ubiquity University, in partnership with over 350 organizations from around the world, have created a 2-hour open space, sacred space, really, so that people can come together to share their experiences as we all navigate our way through this extraordinary pandemic, and to take counsel together as to how we can more effectively work to ensure that the world beyond the pandemic is more healthy, more abundant, more resilient, more sustainable, and in alignment with natural systems and ecological constraints. Many of us thought that the pandemic was going to go away after a month or two, but it's been nearly 6 months and the pandemic shows no signs of retreating. Just today, we heard that cases among children in the state of Florida alone have spiked 137% in the last several weeks. We've learned that countries in Asia are continuing to have to deal with the COVID crisis. I talked with a gentleman in Melbourne, Australia. He's back in lockdown. So we're being challenged by this pandemic in extraordinary ways. It has shut down our economies. It's challenged our health systems. It's put all of us in the new social arena of social distancing, and how we are going to navigate through is really the question for the entire human race to fathom. We've been holding these sessions every day now for 82 days. Tomorrow will be our last session until the 1st of September. And in thinking how we would bring our first phase to a close, particularly as we did on August 6th and August 9th, commemorating the 75th anniversaries of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we thought it would be good to just pause for a moment for today and draw on two individuals that are deeply wise, have experienced the human condition for many decades and are both elders. One, Anne Baring, who many of you know, an analyst, Jungian analyst, who's written two masterworks. One, The Myth of the Goddess, which is probably the classical work on the history and mythology of the great mother and the goddess religions and the archetypal forms associated with the female archetype. Another book, The Dream of the Cosmos, which ranks as one of the most sublime of the written works describing the depth of our journey, the crisis that we're in, and the pathway through to the other side. Then we'll hear from Sailesh Rao, who informed us he's there in Arizona, where the temperatures have reached 109 degrees centigrade. I mean, Fahrenheit, which is well over 40 degrees centigrade. He's the founder of Climate Healers. He's reflected very deeply on the kind of transformation required for humanity to be able to seize the crisis of this pandemic and transform it into an opportunity for human renewal. We'll first hear from Anne, and then after she's spoken, I'll ask her a question or two. Then we'll hear from Sailesh Rao. After he's spoken, I'll ask him a question or two, and then we'll bring both Anne and Sailesh together for 20 or 30 minutes in dialogue. And we encourage all of you who are on this Zoom call to write your questions or comments in the chat box or in the Q&A box. We want to welcome all of you that are out there. We're broadcasting live through about 40 partner channels on our Facebook page, on YouTube. So I want to thank all of you live streamers out there, particularly the Sign network. We welcome you. And now, Anne, I would love to turn the floor over to you.
Right. Well, my paper is called A Crucial Time of Choice. I have to read it because I'm very ancient and I can't remember like the young people can. So I'd like to, as a Jungian and a historian, I'd like to offer an archetypal overview of why the current crisis has come into being, showing when, where, and how the masculine and feminine archetypes, reflected in the image of a god and goddess, became separated, and why this separation has had such a deep impact on Western civilization. I'm not speaking only of the pandemic, but the far greater challenge of climate change. We live in a world that has been governed by the masculine archetype for some 2,500 years, with no feminine archetype to balance it, no sacred marriage between them. As a result, world culture and the human psyche are now dangerously out of balance, out of alignment with the earth and the cosmos. 40 or so years ago, I had a visionary dream of a cosmic woman. Since then, my life has been focused on the recovery and restoration of the feminine archetype, the archetype that stands for our relationship with nature and the earth. It also stands for a totally different perspective on life, a perspective which recognizes that we live on a sacred planet, that our human lives participate in a sacred cosmic order, and that our role as humans is to care for the life of this planet. The feminine stands for the soul, for the heart, and for compassion and justice, the two primary values which protect and serve life. It is summed up in this statement by a Council of Indigenous People of North America some years ago. All life is sacred. We come into life as sacred beings. When we abuse the sacredness of life, we affect all creation. Today, we are faced with a choice that will determine whether or not we survive as a species. Through ignorance, hubris, and the belief that we could dominate nature to the advantage of our species alone, we have interfered so disastrously with the organism of the planet that over the last 50 years, our growing numbers and our mindless exploitations of its resources have brought about not only the destruction of 60% of all species, but also the crisis of climate change. We have somehow to change our attitude to life, to relinquish the false myth of growth, progress, and consumption we have been living by, and cease our ongoing assault on the life and resources of the planet. This is a time of great peril, but also unparalleled opportunity. Never before in our species' memory has there been this collective opportunity to change course before it is too late. We have 10 years, no more. We need to understand why we have lost touch with nature, why we have learned so little from all our spiritual traditions, East and West, that we prepare to destroy God's creation with our nuclear weapons, whose very existence pollutes the earth. 2,000 years ago, this prophecy was recorded in the fourth gospel of the Essenes. This gospel and 3 others was discovered by Edmund Zekeli in the secret archives of the Vatican and translated from the Aramaic by him. But there will come a day when the Son of Man will turn his face from his earthly mother and betray her, even denying his mother and his birthright. Then shall he sell her into slavery, and her flesh shall be ravaged, her blood polluted, and her breath smothered. He will bring the fire of death into all parts of her kingdom, and his hunger will devour all her gifts and leave in their place only a desert. All these things he will do out of ignorance of the law. And as a man dying slowly cannot smell his own stench, so will the Son of Man be blind to the truth, that as he plunders and ravages and destroys his earthly mother, so does he plunder and ravage and destroy himself. For he was born of his earthly mother, and he is one with her. And all that he does to his mother, even so does he do to himself. Every word of this prophecy has come true. Believing ourselves to be separate from nature and above nature, and having no idea of why we are on this planet, we have grossly interfered with the harmony of the natural world and are bringing disease and possible extinction upon ourselves. In the words of an American philosopher, William Ophuls, what the impending ecological crisis forces us to confront is that we have sacrificed meaning, morality, and almost all higher values for the sordid boon of material wealth and worldly power. To keep drinking from this poison chalice will bring only sickness and death. In order to transform our present view of reality, we need to understand the ideas and beliefs that have created it. When did we lose the awareness that all life is sacred? Why did we lose the feminine archetype that connected us to nature? Owing to the researches that I and a number of women have made over the last 40 years, we now know that in the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras, the principal deity worship was the Great Mother. In this forgotten cosmology, there was no creator beyond creation. No creator beyond creation. Creation emerged from the womb of the Great Mother. All species, including our own, were her children. Everything on Earth and in the cosmos was connected through relationship with her. Then, around 1500 BC, give or take 100 or so years, there was a change so great that its repercussions are still felt today because it has been the major influence on Western civilization. This change was the replacement of the Great Mother by the Great Father, preceded by a period when there were both goddesses and gods. As the monotheistic Father God brought creation into being as something separate and distant from himself, so nature became split off from spirit and was no longer sacred. Simultaneously, the rise of powerful city-states in the Middle East led to the creation of a succession of vast empires, territorial conquest, and war. The theme of conquest and the pursuit of power, laid down so long ago, continues to this day with the leaders of the current great empires, China, Russia, and America. Although the architectural, artistic, and literary creations of these empires were mind-blowing, the suffering created by them was also mind-blowing. Millions of young men lost their lives and died in atrocious pain. Millions of women and children were raped and sold into slavery, in the same way as the tragic Yazidi women were raped and sold by Islamic State. Deep traumas were created in the collective psyche of humanity that are unhealed to this day. During these thousands of years of war, we forgot about nature and our relationship with her. Gradually, we developed the idea that we were above nature, entitled to control and dominate her for the benefit of our species alone. To summarize, the change in the image of deity was a primary factor in separating nature from spirit. There was a second factor that contributed to the loss of the sacredness of nature, a forgotten event that has had a devastating influence on patriarchal culture, the oppression of women, and our relationship with the planet. What happened was this. The Jewish people once worshipped both a goddess and a god, a queen and a king of heaven, who together created the world. But in 621 BC, under a king called Josiah, a powerful group of priests called Deuteronomists took control of the first temple in Jerusalem. They removed every trace of the goddess Asherah, the queen of heaven, who was worshipped as the Holy Spirit and as divine wisdom, and also as the tree of life, a tree that connected the invisible and visible worlds, and whose fruit was the gift of immortality. The shamanic rituals of the high priest, which had honored and communed with the Queen of Heaven as the tree of life, divine wisdom, and the Holy Spirit, were replaced by new rituals based on obedience to Yahweh's law. But the Deuteronomists didn't stop there. They also created the myth of the fall with its grim message of disobedience, guilt, sin, punishment, suffering, and the banishment of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. They demoted the goddess, whose title was Mother of all living, into the human figure of Eve, giving her the same title as the former goddess, and placing 2 trees in the garden instead of 1. They blamed Eve for the sin of disobedience that brought about the fall and for bringing sin, suffering, and death into the world. Henceforth, all women would be contaminated by Eve's sin and would have to be under men's control, lest they create further disasters. I cannot begin to tell you the catastrophic effects of this myth on Christian civilization. The created world was no longer a manifestation of the tree of life, but was viewed as marred in sin, contaminated by the fall, no longer sacred. Woman's long oppression, even persecution, stems directly from this myth. Her voice was silenced for millennia. Yahweh was left as the sole transcendent creator God. The divine feminine aspect of God was deleted from the image of deity. The only place where the concept of the sacred marriage survived in the West was in the mystical Jewish tradition of Kabbalah, known as the voice of the dove. The divine feminine was not only banished from Judaism, but also from Christianity, which took its image of God from Judaism. Islam also had a sole male creator God. The end result of this new polarizing cosmology was that life on earth was split off from the divine world. Nature was split off from spirit. Men were identified with spirit and women with nature. Body was split off from mind and mind from soul. Sexuality was sinful. Woman's only role was to obey and serve man and carry his seed. All this was a complete reversal of the earlier cosmology of the Great Mother. There is one further factor that needs to be included in this story. This was the deliberate decision by the Roman Church to wipe out all trace of Jesus' marriage to Mary Magdalene and create the vicious calumny of Mary as a penitent whore. Think what it would have meant for the development of Western civilization if the union of Jesus and Mary Magdalene had been celebrated by the church founded in his name. Had their marriage been recognized and Jesus not turned into the celibate Son of God, Christianity would have had a totally different history, without a celibate male priesthood and without the terrifying persecution of women in the witch trials that scarred Europe for 5 centuries. We might have been spared the disastrous association of sexuality with sin and the misogyny and mistrust of women that affects our culture to this day. The monotheistic cosmology of the 3 patriarchal religions has led to the situation where the earth is no longer viewed as sacred, and we are confronted with the catastrophic effects of the loss of the divine feminine. They did not teach reverence and respect for a sacred earth. They supported endless wars, conquests, and brutal conversions in the name of their God. They treated other races as inferior and subject to the white race and the God they worshipped. They put their emphasis on faith, belief, and belonging to an institution, not on deepening our relationship with life or serving life. Because of this history, we have been on the wrong path for more than 2,000 years, out of alignment with the earth and the cosmos. It has led us to this time of crisis and awakening, and to the need for a new, yet very old story, a story that tells us that we are the life and breath of the divine in human form, and that all life is infused with divinity. The primary experience of human consciousness from 2500 BC until the present day has been one of increasing alienation from nature, culminating in the ideology of technological progress and limitless growth that is unrelated to the needs of the planet and our utter dependence on the viability of its life. Our current worldview, whether East or West, rests on the premise of our mastery of nature where the diminishing resources of the planet are unthinkingly plundered to serve the ever-growing numbers and needs of our species alone. Materialist or reductionist science, built on the flawed foundation bequeathed to it by patriarchal religion, and has dispensed with both God and the soul. It tells us that the universe is without life, purpose, or meaning. When the physical brain dies, that is the end of us. The highest authority is the rational mind. We are separate from the world around us, and the master story is technological progress. I think this explains why, in a worldwide culture influenced by the secular philosophy of science, because it's spread everywhere, this philosophy, we have come to believe that it doesn't matter what we do to matter, that nature and matter are not sacred, that we are not part of that sacredness. This is why there is no foundation for morality in our relationship with the earth. What we think we need, we take. Jung could see the dangers of this materialist philosophy and commented, "As scientific understanding has grown, so our world has become dehumanized. Man feels himself isolated in the cosmos because he is no longer involved in nature and has lost his emotional, unconscious identity with natural phenomena. No voices now speak to man from stones, plants, and animals, nor does he speak to them, believing they can hear. His contact with nature has gone." In another passage, he describes how, as the conscious mind gained more and more autonomy and independence from the deeper matrix of the psyche, the whole superstructure of consciousness became disengaged from the age-old instinctive ground out of which it has developed. Consciousness, thus torn from its roots, he said, possesses a Promethean freedom, but it also partakes of the nature of a godless hubris. Once, long ago, the world was experienced as alive with spirit. Nature was part of a sacred cosmic whole. In spite of horrendous persecution, the indigenous peoples of the world have kept alive this awareness of the sacredness of nature and the idea of our kinship with all creation. The new story emerging in quantum physics, this is a different aspect of science, tells us that the whole universe is a unified field. Our lives are part of a cosmic web of life which connects all life forms in the universe and on this planet. Every atom of life interacts with every other atom, no matter how distant. We are not only connected through the internet, but through the infinitesimal particles of subatomic matter. We are part of an immense field of consciousness which sustains not only our world, but the entire universe. This restores the original cosmology of the Great Mother at a new level of understanding. A new vision is struggling to be born, a new vision of our profound relationship with an intelligent, living, and interconnected universe. The realization is dawning that we are participants in a cosmic consciousness or intelligence which is present in every atom of our being and every particle of matter. We are called to a profound process of transformation that is manifesting as a new planetary consciousness, a consciousness which recognizes that we are part of a sacred web of life. We are part of the life of the earth as well as the cosmos. Thousands, even millions of us are joining groups like Humanity Rising, working together to create a new civilization based on different values and a different relationship with the planet. We need a science and a technology that does not seek to dominate nature, but works with nature, humbly respecting its harmonious order. We need women who are truly feminine to guide us, working with enlightened men to restore the values and the practices that could transform our relationship with the planet into one of love and care. This pandemic carries an urgent message for us to wake up to the small window of opportunity, no more than 10 years, that we have to change course before it's too late. This means change in every sphere of life, change in the very concept of what it means to be human and living on this extraordinary planet, change above all in our relationship with the planet. We tread a path which is on the knife edge between the conscious integration of a new vision on the one hand and the virtual extinction of our species on the other. Which path will we choose?
Thank you, Anne. Thunderstorms have just started over Paris, so I hope that my internet remains stable. If not, I'll just turn my video off. But Anne, I want to just ask you a question based on your enormous amount of research into the archetypal formation of the Great Mother and the mythology around the goddesses. If you had to suggest a particular entry into the archetype of the feminine at this extraordinary moment where we're trying to navigate through a pandemic, which has come from the earth in some ways as a call to higher awareness, what would you say that was? What aspects of the feminine are speaking to us through the pandemic and more broadly in terms of the further development of our spirituality?
I think the most noticeable thing of the pandemic is the care that the doctors and nurses are giving to patients all over the world. This is an international phenomenon. All of them are sacrificing their lives, really, or offering their lives in order to care for these extremely ill people. That in itself is extraordinary. This has never happened before. And this is the feminine in action. This is the care and the love, which is really going into the saving of lives of the thousands of people they are saving. And also the care that governments are trying to give, some of them not able to give, some of them totally hopeless, but they know that they ought to be doing something. And this is a change of consciousness. They can't just let things go on happening. They have to act, and they have to protect the lives of those that are there in their care, so to speak. So I would say that this is a new thing that is coming in. We can see the best of humanity in action, as well as the worst. But the best is something new and very, very moving, and totally could be transformative with all the individuals, millions of individuals who are offering their skills and their lives to save other people's lives.
Thank you. And then other question that comes to mind as you were describing the grip that the patriarchal archetypal forms had on the Abrahamic religions in particular, but all the major axial religions, that was so destructive in so many ways. As humanity now stands on the threshold of a whole new global spirituality, what aspects of our inherited religious traditions do you think are worth saving, as it were, and where would you draw from the sources that we have from the past as we move forward into a new, more refined awareness of how the universe works and how humanity needs to find its proper place within the natural order?
I think you'll find in all the religious traditions, I've just been studying Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity, you'll find the same message, which is that we carry divinity within us and we are part of the divinity all around us. That is the central message of all these religions. And we haven't noticed it. It hasn't been made prominent enough. So we've been worshiping a God, not realizing that we are part of the divinity that we've been worshiping. And this would mean for a huge change in the image of God. We need to change the image of God so that it no longer is excluding nature, but nature is included in the divinity of the whole of life and the God as well. There's so little that we understand, and we've got fixated in this image of God, which is not necessarily a true one at all. It's missing the feminine element. And it's not inclusive enough because it's split off nature. So I would say the new spirituality could come from all the religious traditions if we really looked at them.
Yes, I mean, I think that's a profound point, and it may be that the source of spirituality will come from science itself, because science, as you're rightly pointing out, is now beginning to describe the interconnected universe, the implicate order, as David Baum put it, in ways that are consistent with the mystics of all the great traditions. And so science may end up leading the way.
Well, I think if you put the two together, you mustn't lose the religious traditions. There's great value in them, but they need to be interpreted in a different way and looked at in a different way. And then they can work with science to create this new story that we're trying to create.
Yes, yes. Well, we'll circle back to Anne, everyone, but I want to now bring in Sailesh Rao from Arizona. Anne is talking to us from England. Sailesh, welcome to our program. He is the founder of Climate Healers. And like Anne, he's reflected very deeply about our current situation and has ideas about the imperatives that we need to embrace in order to move forward in a more holistic and healthy way. Sailesh?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Anne, for that beautiful speech. It was a perfect beginning to what I'm going to talk about. I am a scientist and I'm an engineer, and I used to work on the internet back in the days when no one knew what the internet was. But in 2005, I happened to see Al Gore's presentation on TV, and I was so shocked. I said, if half of what he's saying is true, I'm wasting my time working on engineering. So I started focusing on the environment, and I quit my job and I started doing it full time when I realized how serious the problem is. Within a few years, I was probably one of the most depressed people on the planet because I thought we didn't belong in nature. I was in a forest in the Western Ghats of India in 2009 when the owners of the forest basically told me that they created this out of nothing. They just took a coffee plantation, tore down the fences, and it became this beautiful sanctuary. So I told them, what did you have to do to make this happen? And they said nothing. The animals did everything. They came and dropped their seeds and new trees were born. And so pretty much we had to just give them a space where they felt secure. And then they brought back the forest. So I asked them, how did you make them feel secure? They said, we made them feel secure by patrolling our land and making sure that no human being comes inside. And at that point, I felt very, very small. I felt like I didn't belong on Earth because I was born in that forest, just 200 miles away from where I was standing. So I was depressed. And then I came home, and in 2010, my granddaughter was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at that time. I came to see her when she was a month old, and I held her in my arms, and she looked up at me and she smiled. And with that smile, I felt this chill go up and down my spine. And I felt as if she was telling me, what do you mean I don't belong? I belong exactly as I am. So go find a story in which I belong exactly as I am. And that's what I set out to do when I came back. I was inspired. I wrote my first book, Carbon Dharma, The Occupation of Butterflies. Dharma is about what is the right thing to do. And it's very easy to figure that out. What is the right thing to do? Well, be compassionate, be kind to all life. Give more than you take from life. Just like the owners of the forest were doing. Okay? Then I realized that they were able to do that because they had enough money in the bank to do that. Whereas the people that they had to keep out of the forest had to make a living. So we have a system, a game of money that we are playing in which we are causing the destruction of the planet. So I started looking at the scientific basis of this new story. What is this new story that we can tell? Because I was raised in the Hindu tradition, and in which I was taught that we are part of God. Every one of us is part of God. And God is working through us in the universe. And at first, I mean, when I was working on the environment, I began to disbelieve that. But after my granddaughter looked up at me and smiled, I bought into that. And I said, okay, I have to find a story in which we belong exactly as we are, and God is working through us to create whatever it is that He wanted to create. So I knew what we had to do, but I didn't know how we were going to go about doing it. And for that, we had to tell a story about what were we doing all along. And that story had to be based on science. So I took the next 6 years researching the science of climate change, the science of biodiversity loss, understanding where things are and how we got here, and what could be a plausible explanation for what were we doing all along. Because if God is working through us, God has been working through us all along, not just now. So then I discovered the hypothesis of the thermostat species. Because something fundamental happened in this interglacial period. The Earth has gone through over 100 ice ages and interglacial periods over the last 3 years. And in the process, she created us as a species. And 50,000 years ago, in the previous ice age, we spread out from Africa and went throughout the world. And we are a very adaptive species. See, we were born a prey species, and then we mastered fire, and we became a predator species. And then we spread throughout the world, and then we started agriculture in the current interglacial period. And something magical happened when we started agriculture. We cut down forests. And when we cut down forests, we kept the temperature constant for 10,000 years. We kept the temperature constant, and we prevented the Earth from going back to another ice age 6,000 years ago. And then over the last 200 years, we have created all the tools and technologies we need to understand what we did and now become a conscious thermostat species, a conscious caregiver species. Just like we transitioned or transformed from a prey species to a predator species, now we have the opportunity to transform from a predator species to a caregiver species. So I believe that we are in the midst of the greatest transformation in human history. And I have a slide I'm going to show. I'm going to share with you about this. And in this, the greatest transformation in human history, this is like the discovery of fire. So the choice that Anne put before us is either we go extinct or we transform. We will go extinct if we stay with the system of normalized violence that we are living in today. There's no question that we will go extinct. But if we fashion a system of normalized nonviolence or normal nonviolence, because nonviolence is normal for us, then we can thrive. So from a prey species to a predator species, now we have to become a caregiver species. We call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens today. Sapiens means wise. And we call ourselves wise twice. Have you ever really met a truly wise person who goes around saying, I'm wise, and that too twice? Wisdom always comes with humility. So when we advertise that we are wise, we are actually buying into the narcissism. We are buying into this deep insecurity that we feel that we don't really belong on Earth. So from that, we have to transform ourselves to Homo ahimsa. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word that means nonviolent. So going from a purely Latin designation for us, I'm suggesting that we combine Latin and Sanskrit to call ourselves by our character, not our characteristics. And this transformation requires 7 core shifts. The 7 core shifts are from speciesism, colonialism, racism, ableism, and patriarchy to veganism and radical equality. Why do I highlight veganism there? I highlight veganism because veganism is the idea that we can live without deliberately hurting innocent animals unnecessarily. And whenever I ask anyone, would you deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? They've always said no. So which means that compassion or veganism is at the core of our being. That's who we really are. When we consume animal products, we are fundamentally speciesist because we are telling the animals that they are worth less than us. Because even though they are unnecessary for us to consume, we are going to consume them anyway. It promotes colonialism. For producing animal foods, we are destroying forests in the Amazon today. When we destroy forests in the Amazon, we have to displace indigenous cultures. We have to tell them that they are inferior to our culture. That is colonialism 101. When we consume animal foods, we are promoting racism. Because if you look at who is working in these slaughterhouses, who is working in these factory farms, you will see people of color. You notice where they situate these slaughterhouses and factory farms, they're situated near people of color. Because we want the pollution to go to them, not to us, not to the privileged classes. So there is racism built into the consumption of animal foods. There is ableism built into the consumption of animal foods. Because if you look at the workers in these factory farms or slaughterhouses, they get injuries that disable them. And as soon as they get those injuries that disable them, they are kicked out because they are usually undocumented immigrants and they cannot complain when they're kicked out. And if you look at what we do to the animals to get their, to use their flesh and their secretions for our food, it is the outright abuse of the feminine. So there is patriarchy built in. And we expect our workers to go and abuse the feminine in the slaughterhouses and then come back home and be nice to their wives and to their children. How is that even possible? So you will see incidences of sexism, of sexual abuse increase in these communities. So this is why I say it is from all of these isms to veganism and radical equality. Radical equality in which we actually do treat everyone as equal, not just pretend to do that. And it is from diseases and divisions for humanity to health and unity for humanity. So as you can imagine, this is a total transformation of our system. So currently we make money out of the diseases that we give to human beings. We make them eat food that makes them deliberately sick, and then we treat them in hospitals. So chronic diseases are the cash cows of the pharmaceutical industry. We divide people by race, by color, and then we make them fight each other. We have wars. We have wars against each other through nations. From that, we have to have a system that automatically has health and unity for humanity. Currently, we make money out of destroying and polluting the planet. So from destruction and pollution of the planet, we need to have a system in which we automatically remediate and regenerate the planet. From death and cruelty to animals, to love and kindness for animals. That should be normal in our daily actions. From a culture of consumption, which is really a culture of slavery. If you are tied to your consumption, you are enslaved by that consumption. From a culture of consumption to a culture of compassion. Culture of compassion, compassion is about freedom. It's about liberation. From a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance. Currently, we think that we are in a scarce world, but in reality, we are extracting 6 times as much food as we really need because we are feeding 5 of that to our animals. And they give a small pittance from that food that we are feeding them. So we are creating an artificial scarcity because we are living in a mindset of scarcity. from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance. And everything that we show on the left-hand side of this transformation is driven by the money system that we have created. It's a money-driven economy that does this to us. And it is the game of money that we are playing. The rules of the game causes us to behave this way. So from that, we have to create a new game in which we automatically serve others. And that is what is rewarding in the new system. So we have to create a new game in which we lead our ordinary lives and we automatically do everything on the right-hand side of this transformation. And we are working on such a game. It's called the game of Aquarius. I will not go into details on that, but thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you. And thank you so much for inviting me to this forum.
Thank you, Sailesh. Appreciated your comments. There have been many such sort of pictographs of sort of old thinking and new thinking. You can do that in physics. You can do that in economics. We just had a week or two ago, Kate Rayworth, her book on donut economics, really juxtaposes many of the same polarities that that you've laid out. I'd like to just inquire. That was a big clap of thunder. I don't know whether you guys heard that. That was right over my head. I'd like to inquire about your emphasis on animals. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting to me. You know, you have good company. Yuval Harari, you know, the great author of Sapiens and Homo Deus and 21 Lessons of the 21st Century, like you, brings our treatment of animals right into the middle of our predicament and our failure as a species to understand and hold the sacred. So let me ask the following question, because it appeared in some of the chats. What would you say to the indigenous peoples like the Eskimos that live off the seal and other indigenous tribes that live within the container of nature and take only what they need, as prayerfully as they take all that they need? Is there something about animals sort of ontologically you're calling attention to, or is it the way we're treating animals, you know, in the massive slaughterhouses with all kinds of toxic chemicals, and it's a degradation of life? It's inherently racist, as you're saying. So is your argument, as it were, in kind, or is it more of a procedural? If we would treat them better, it would be okay?
My argument is in kind. It is saying that we have altered the environment. We have altered the earth. We have poured 250 billion tons of toxic chemicals into the environment every year for the last 40, 50 years. And when we do that, even the Inuits, even the Eskimos, even the Inuits are eating toxic foods and eat high up in the food chain. Okay, so we have to inform them. There's nothing wrong with what they were doing before. Just like there was nothing wrong with what we were doing, you know, milking cows before, because we didn't know. We thought it was necessary for us to eat that. And we were eating that because we thought it was necessary. Now we know it is not necessary. Not only do we know it's not necessary, we also know it is toxic to us. It is causing all these chronic diseases. And the one thing that we have going for us as a species is that we are a very adaptive species. We have managed to go from Africa to everywhere in the world and figure out how to live. And we can do this now. So we know that we have polluted the environment. And because of that, we need to go to our indigenous brothers and sisters and tell them, look, we have done something and we have to clean up. We need your help to clean up. And in the process, your culture is also being affected. Okay? So we may have to figure out how to give you better plant foods to eat. So we're all in this together now. See, the story that I tell is that we were part of God's plan all along. And since we were part of God's plan all along, there is no mistake. You can't call anything a mistake. It is something that we didn't understand. The world does not need to be changed. It needs to be understood. When you understand the world, you change automatically, effortlessly, and the world changes with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's bring Anne back in, and I'll converse with both of you for a bit now. Anne, what would be your view on Sailesh's point about the necessity to include veganism in any holistic vision of the future of humanity?
I think he's right, but it's going to take time. It's already started in this country, in the UK, among the young. Many of them have changed to veganism or vegetarianism, but it's going to take time. And I think this meat-consuming culture, which is growing exponentially with the Amazon being destroyed and everything, it's all connected, I would say, with the military-industrial complex. It's the same symptom. It's to do with forcing the earth to obey us in a way. I don't know whether that makes sense, but I've just got a book here which I've got, which is called Hope in Hell, just being published by Jonathan Porritt. And he says that we spend a massive 1.8 trillion worldwide on arms and building new weapons. That is the core madness, and also it's contributing greatly to global warming because all these military complexes use oil to make them function, fossil fuels. So I would connect these two things, the need for veganism as well as the need to disarm worldwide, East and West, because what is being done with the arms is a sacrilege. Just the way we treat animals is a sacrilege. It's the same phenomenon.
Right.
Would Sailesh agree with that?
Absolutely. You have it right. It is the same system. These are symptoms of the same system of normalized violence that we are in.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's about transitioning from that to a system of normal non-violence. So it's literally, implementing Martin Luther King's dream. Not just saying it's a dream, it'll come later. No, it is figuring out how to implement Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, or Gandhi's dream of a world without borders, without barriers, where we treat all life as sacred, including the life of those animals. See, we kill more animals in 4 to 12 hours than all the humans that ever died in wars throughout human history put together. So it's not just a few people doing that. We are all doing it with our choices. When we order that burger, we are ordering a hit on another animal somewhere. And some poor colored person is going to go and do that job of killing that animal for us. So that's where the privilege comes in, because we just order and it comes to us. And someone actually has to do that really bad job. And so the system of privileges and having to preserve our privileges, which is driving this entire colonial structure, that is the root of it, at the root of it. That's the root of the hierarchy that we have built. And it's about dissolving that hierarchy. And vegans have done that. Vegans have relinquished that fundamental privilege of being human. Of saying, okay, even though we are human, we don't want to oppress animals. Even though we have the power to oppress them, we don't want to oppress them. And when that happens, we discover that we are actually healthier, we are happier. We are so much more, I'm so much more happier now than when I was a vegetarian in 2008. I turned vegan. And I felt this huge sense of guilt lift off my shoulders when I went vegan. And I had this relief that I don't have to lie to myself anymore. And so that relief that lightened my spirit and helped me see things in a completely different light. And of course, raising a granddaughter as a vegan helped a lot, because she saw things that I wasn't able to see. I had already blocked my mind. She would tell me that fairy tale is full of violence. Why are you reading this to me?
That's true.
Yeah, even our epics. I mean, I was trying to read to her the Ramayana, one of our famous epics. And she stopped me in the first chapter and she said, why is Dasharatha shooting that deer? Who told him it's okay to shoot that deer? Why are you reading me stories like this? And I stopped. I said, you're right. There's something wrong. Even our epics have to be rewritten for the vegan era. And you said, it will take time, but unfortunately, we don't have the time. So we have this sense of urgency. We have to convince people now that we are part of something much, much larger. And we have been all along. It's part of something much, much larger. This intelligence that's greater than us. And that intelligence is telling us we need to transform now. We don't have too much time. And then we have to make sure that we provide tasty food, give it to people, tasty, healthy food, make it available to people everywhere. And then say, look, we are pleading with you to eat this, become healthy, and then we can go off and start planting trees. We have to plant 1 trillion trees, more than 1 trillion trees, maybe a couple of trillion trees. We have to bring back the forests of the world. We have to bring back the animals of the world. We have lost 90% of the wild animals in terms of biomass. In terms of biomass, we have lost almost 90% of them. And if 90% of humans were dead, we would be thinking that there is something wrong and we would be taking action, right? But if 90% of wild animals are dead, we are continuing with our current consumption, saying there is still 10% left, there's no problem. That is speciesism. That speciesism that tells us that they are not as important as us. But when we say, whoa, 90% of our cousins have died, we need to do something about this, then we wake up to what we need to do. And I think, I'm calculating that we have only till 2026. We have to do this within the next 6 years. And I'm basing that on the rate at which we're killing wild animals. Their biomass is going down so fast, and it's going down fast exponentially, that we are on track to drive them to zero, virtually zero, by 2026 if we don't change. But we can transform. We can transform.
Can I ask a question, Jim?
Sure.
Of Sailesh and you as well. Do you think that all this desire for power and control comes from fear at the root of it all, and also not knowing why we are here? It's anger that nobody's told us what we're doing on this planet. It's beginning to come through now, and the ancient Vedas were teaching it and the Upanishads, but we've got a huge gap between them and what's happening now. So I think the need for control comes from really uncontrollable fear deep down in the psyche.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. It comes from fear born of ignorance of our true nature.
Yeah.
Our true nature is compassion, and we feel that in the core of our being.
We do, yeah.
Yeah,
and come out, I think, in the care that people are giving the sick. That compassion is there.
Right.
It's instinctive.
It's not only in the doctors and nurses who are treating the sick, but you also look at these poor workers who are picking our fruits or picking our produce, who are chopping our meat. I mean, they are going out there, they're being told they are essential workers, but they are being paid a pittance, and they're contracting diseases, and so they're also sacrificing themselves. So I see the animals are also sacrificing themselves. The animals sacrifice their bodies to create this thermostat for the planet, for us. So I see the animals as co-creators of the thermostat, not just something that we used. It was a joint effort between humans and animals to create this thermostat for the planet, so the planet never has to go back to another ice age ever again. And now we can give the controls to our children and say, look, we have the science behind it. We know what you need to do. We have to bring back the forest, and we will do that over the next 5-6 years. We are going to go plant all these trees, bring back the forest. We are going to bring the ice back in the Arctic by putting whatever we need to do, reflectors to send some of the sunlight back into space or whatever we need to do. And we'll manage the temperature of the Earth and then say, here it is. It's your job. Your role as a species is to maintain the climate for all of life to thrive, so that the Earth never has to go back to another ice age. Because ice ages cause a lot of suffering. They do cause a lot of suffering because ice ages shrink the area in which life can thrive. So life is going to come together and start competing with each other, and a lot of animals are dying and a lot of trees die. And so over 100 ice ages have happened over the last 3 million years. And the Earth said, no, I can't tolerate that anymore. I'm going to create a species that will get me out of this. And she did it. I mean, it's incredible what she has done. So I look at it, I'm in awe of nature. As a systems engineer, I'm in awe of nature. This is such a beautiful system. Everything is in place. See, no animal ever does anything that goes against nature. So why do we think that we are an exception to that? Yeah. So that's the gift that my granddaughter brought me. She said, look at it differently and you will see that you belong exactly as you are. And as part of that, you are going to transform. And she's been guiding us, guiding the transformation, for me at least.
Let me ask a question that came through Sheila Spramulli, that somewhere in this killing field of animals is the very difficult issue of abortion. Mm-hmm. That we need to find our voice about abortion that isn't grounded in the religious traditions. And Sailesh, given this conversation about the sanctity of all life, where would you come out on this very, very delicate issue of abortion?
Well, I think it applies more to the West and America, where it's very strongly felt. But I think that it comes from an ignorance of the fact that we're part of the divinity of life. Therefore, we can't just do what we want. We can't just do away with a life. We can't decide, well, I don't want this one, but I'll have that one. So that's one thing I feel about it. It's wrong to take life. It definitely is. But on the other hand, why is there not far more contraception all over the world? And it's blocked in certain parts of the world for religious or social reasons. And we've got a huge population problem. So abortion is all part of that. If we could solve the population growth problem, we wouldn't need abortion. We would have everything more regulated. And instead of people having 6, 7, 8 children, they'd have 1 or possibly 2, and they wouldn't need to go through this awful ritual of getting rid of life. It's all connected. You can't separate the population growth and the population problem from the abortion issue, I don't think. It's all tangled up together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Anne. It comes down to making contraception available everywhere, universally for free, and then raising everyone's standard of living so that they can make their choices. If you look at where population is increasing, it's usually in places where people are very poor. They're doing it for survival. And it's about it's our system that's creating this growth because we want the growth to happen. We are constantly asking our governments to grow our economy. And how do you grow the economy? We need more consumers to grow the economy. So that's this growth paradigm. This is the paradigm of the caterpillar that's causing us to do this. And so the COVID-19, I think, has put us in the chrysalis phase of the caterpillar. It's put the caterpillar into the chrysalis phase and made us think about how can we become butterflies. And that's where I think all this, even Black Lives Matter is talking about equality. The butterfly is Dr. King's dream realized, or Gandhi's dream realized. It's a place of equality where women are allowed to choose what they want to do. So it's, I think it is completely mixed in with the same question, sanctity of life question.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Another question that's emerged is around the Dalai Lama, who many people consider maybe the holiest person in the world, certainly an icon for millions of people around the world. And he is an ardent meat eater. So I think the question that I'd love to have both of you comment on is this relationship between embracing a certain dietary regime or discipline and the level of holiness or consciousness in some of the people that we espouse to be paragons of virtue. So what would you say about the Dalai Lama as a meat eater? Just to tease out this question that I want to ask is, what really is holiness in the world today? Is it based on your diet? Is it based on your state of being as a compassionate person? Where would you locate holiness?
Yeah. First of all, I don't consider veganism to be a diet. It is an ethical stance. It's a stance saying that if I can live without hurting animals, I will. I will. It is moral for me to do so. Right? Dalai Lama may be misinformed. I do not know. I do not know his history. He may be misinformed by his doctors that he needs the food. See, when I ask the question, would you deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? He will also say no. I bet you he will say no. I would never do that. But then he's parsing it. He may be thinking it is necessary for me to eat because my doctor said so. Even though millions of people are living without killing animals, living vegan lives, he doesn't see that yet. Or he may think, I didn't do it deliberately. Someone else did it. Therefore, I'm not hurt by that. So we are parsing that question. And we have to look within ourselves to see how are we parsing that question, and is our parsing correct? It's a path that every one of us has to take. Whether it's the Dalai Lama or the Pope, we're all in the same boat. We all have to take this path. It's not that I'm not claiming that everyone in nature, everything in nature is non-violent. Nature is violent in its own. But we have the power and the choice to be violent or non-violent as a species. Because we are the most powerful species on the planet. No other animal can stand up to us. Okay? So it's up to us to use that power wisely. We can use that power to destroy the planet, which is what we are doing today. Or we can use that power to regenerate the planet and take care of it. And be the caregivers for all life, which I think should become normal for us. So I think all of us have this journey to take. When we stop eating animals, we stop wearing animal clothes, that's only getting to first base of veganism. That's just the first base. And then from there, you have to get to second base where you are looking at every one of your consumption, because you begin to see that all consumption is inherently violent. And you minimize your consumption. Okay. Then you start talking to others about it. So you become an advocate, so that is like third base. So there is this, it's an infinite journey that we are on when we go on this vegan journey. And eventually it's the journey towards enlightenment. That's home.
So Anne, where would you come out on this question of the nature of holiness in the day in the time in which we find ourselves? Where do you locate holiness?
I locate it in a wonderful man called the super vet, who has or used to have a weekly program in which he saves animals' lives by operating on them in the most amazing way. He's called super vet because of that. But what is intensely moving is the people who bring the animals in. They love their animals so much, they're crying with distress because their animal is sick and they want it to be healed. And he just takes the animal in, comforts them, gives them a kiss and a hug. Then he takes the animal into the operating theater and you watch it happening. You watch the precision of his hands with how he's learned this science of operating on these animals. Then he makes pieces of metal to make false legs. And he's a great inventor in that. He's taking veterinary skills far beyond what they have been. So that is the thing that comes to, he's a holy man and people know it. The way he touches an animal, the way he speaks to it, he is a holy man. So I agree about the Dalai Lama. I followed him for years, that he also is a holy man, whether he's a meat eater or not. One of the dangers, I think, of transforming in the way that we would like to is that one group, possibly the people who are vegans, will attack the other groups for not being vegans. And then we get the old Inquisition idea back again. We are good, you are bad. We have to be very careful that we don't fall into that pit, which is very easy because it's coming up in England now and in different ways, that you're not allowed to say certain things because it's racist, and you're not allowed to have a discussion about things in the university without speakers being cancelled or sidelined. This is a very big issue of the freedom of speech. And so veganism comes into this, if Sailesh will allow me, that we have to be very careful that we don't fall into, what's the word? Just instructing other people that they have to follow us, which is the old inquisitorial idea. If you don't believe what we believe, we'll burn you at the stake.
Yeah. No, it cannot, it has to be a matter of choice. Absolutely. It has to be something that, this is why I say the focus should be on making sure that healthy, immune boosting, whole plant foods are easily available to anyone who wants to eat.
And
so that hunger should be banished, you know.
And you put it the way you have, that the animals are our cousins. They're on the planet with us to be cared for and, you know, looked after and everything. There is progress in some ways with, for instance, caring for the lions in Africa and things like that. There's a great, but equally there are people who go and still shoot them for big game. You know, that you get both in this terrible mixture that we're in at the moment. Also, it's no good constant, what can we do about all this industrial military complex? What can we do about the Trumps of the world, or Modi in India, or whoever who's, you know, amplifying the difference between people rather than bringing people together and pursuing the path of war, preparation for war all the time. We don't hear about it, but it's going on. What do we do about that? That's a big problem. Do we ignore it, Sailesh and Jim? Do we ignore it and just go on with what we're doing, trying to create this new civilization and let it be so that it will gradually fade away? Or do we attack it head on? I don't know.
The way, I mean, I've been approaching it through Buckminster Fuller's work, which is basically create something new that makes the old obsolete. We have to create the new game. Until we have the new game, we don't have a right to tell people to stop playing the old game. We have to give them the new game to play so that they can play that game and say, I prefer the new game over the old game. And then they will automatically start choosing the new game. The new game has to be based on Kate Raworth's work. You know, it has to be based on, so it automatically brings all the 7 core shifts and simultaneously makes sure that if everyone plays the new game, we are within the bounds of the planet, the planetary boundaries, right? So that we know that we are going to live a good life, all of us to be. So I'd say, you know, they are self-destructing themselves anyway. You know, the current system is imploding. It's not imploding, it's not collapsing like you would expect. It's not a sudden collapse. It is just disintegrating in front of our eyes. We are beginning to lose confidence in it. Everywhere, not just in the US, everywhere we are beginning to lose confidence in it. People are questioning it. People are rising up against it. And so we need to create the alternatives so that people can say, that I would choose that over this. And so we are actually working on this new game that you can play in conjunction with the old game and thereby regulate your behavior. And then when you do that, automatically the old game collapses because the old game is totally dependent on growth. If it doesn't grow, it fails because it's a caterpillar's game.
Let me probe one more level around this question of how humanity understands and honors life. And I've been using the vector of vegetarianism or veganism, our relationship to other animals, our appreciation that human beings are not unique, sentient beings abound around planet Earth. And Dr. Ferguson is now pushing the conversation one step further, asking, are not plants living organisms too, with simply a different kind of consciousness? Right. As most of you know, plants demonstrate every capacity that animals and humans do in a different way. Right. Trees can cry, trees can scream, trees show emotion, trees communicate, trees are symbiotically connected with the web of life and other trees. And so maybe starting with you, Sailesh, if it's unethical to eat an animal, where does one draw the line? If humanity finds itself in a web of sentient beings, from caterpillars becoming chrysalises, becoming butterflies, to cabbages, to fish in the sea, to birds in the air, if it's all conscious, if it's all aware, then how does one make judgments as to what one consumes?
Right. A very good question. James Lovelock actually said something very simple. He said, when we start giving more than we are taking, then we will. And we know in biology, we know about trophic levels. We know that animals eat plants. And when we eat animals, we are actually not just eating the animal, we are eating all the plants that the animal ate as well. Okay, so if we think plants are conscious beings, we should still be eating plants because that minimizes our take from the planet. And so that we can give more than we can routinely. That's what we need to be doing, right? And then I appeal to, look within yourself and ask yourself what feels good. Would you wring the neck of a chicken yourself? Or would you chop the head of a cow yourself? Or would you take a cabbage yourself? Do you see a difference between the two when you do that? If you feel a difference between the two, your mind is already telling you that there is a difference. Right? When you take a cabbage, it's an offering from the plant saying, take my cabbage, or take my fruit and spread my seeds for me. It's an offering from the tree. So you feel good about that, right? And you feel good about these because even the animals that we eat, we actually slather them with all kinds of herbs and spices to make them taste like plants before we eat them. We don't eat raw animals, very rarely, right? We cook them, we make them, we fill them with all kinds of spices so that they taste like plants. So that's what we are designed to eat. I mean, medically also, we now know that eating a whole food plant-based diet is the healthiest thing you could do, especially in this current environment when there is so much toxins out there. Because plants, fundamentally, they're very good filters. They try to filter all the toxins, store them in their trunks, and they try to give you the freshest fruit that they could possibly get. So when we eat the fruit, we are using the filtering power of the plants. But when we take the entire plant and feed it to our cows, the cows are going to ingest all the toxins, and they're going to store that in their bodies. So the cow, in one day can eat more toxins than you can breathe in 14 years, even if you're sitting next to that toxic plant. Because that toxin is getting concentrated and it's coming down in the rain, it's being absorbed by plants, and they're storing it in their trunks. And the cow eats that, right? And then it stores that in its body. The cow stores that in her body. So it is, any way we look at it, it is telling us the signal from nature is go down in the trophic levels. You'll be fine. Then you can thrive. The animals will start thriving, because when will we stop eating animals? When they're down to 5%? When they're down to 1%? I mean, how much are we going to kill the wild animals before we say stop?
Yeah,
so at some point, we need to say, hey, we have gone too far.
And what is your comment on this question of the extent of sentience in the natural order and where human beings draw the line?
Well, I think Sailesh is right in what he's been saying, but I was just thinking back to, say, the Paleolithic era, when there was no vegetation and they had to live only on the animals. But they would ask the animals permission, and the shaman would go to the animal kingdom and say, may we take a life in order to survive? And the animal would give its consent. And the shaman was the messenger between the human and the animal world. We have no shamans now. And nobody is asking the permission of the animals or the plants or the trees or anything, really. So it's a different concept. It's what I said in the beginning, that it's a different perspective on life altogether that needs to come in to being. And as this comes into being, so we will change. And we have to do it rather rapidly. But I think the whole of nature is sentient, but we are part of that sentiency as well. So we are really communicating with our brothers and sisters all the time. I've got birds outside my patio. I feed them all the time with special little things that they like. And they talk and they come to be fed and everything. So you can make the relationship. Or with a dog or a cat. Anyone who has a dog or a cat will know that they become absolutely indispensable to us. We love them. And I'm sure your little granddaughter, she's probably one of the children who are coming in now to teach us, because there are many children being born like her who are thinking in a totally different way. And they don't want the old stories of glory and war and fighting and everything. They want a much gentler approach to everything. So maybe we're being taught by them, and we should just pay attention and listen more. But as for the sentiency of the whole of creation, absolutely, no question about it. And as we become more sensitive, so we will become aware of this. I mean, in the old days, stones used to speak to us, and we used to hear them speaking. And trees spoke, and plants and everything. And they would say, also they taught people in the forest, use this herb to cure this and that disease. And the people would listen and learn. Again, the shaman was the intermediary and still is. So there's a lot to be learned from the forest people and from the indigenous people about these methods of communicating with the rest of creation. Yes?
Yeah, let me, as we start to draw this to a close, I'd like your comment, because I really want, this is a very rich vein, everyone. If humanity is going to come out of its singularity and out of its notion of separateness, as Sailesh is challenging us today, we've got to completely reevaluate our relationship at a minimum with other animals and with all life forms. And I want to get your comments on the following that has come up a couple times in the course of Humanity Rising. About 2 months ago, an engineer in the United States was looking at the crop circles that were appearing in England around Avesbury. And there was a crop circle that appeared, I think, toward the end of April, very early on, in the perfect formation of a coronavirus with an extension down that, as he began to study it, actually contained the key to healing. And this blew his mind, because normally you think of crop circles as kind of nice geometric forms. But it was clear to him and others who were studying it is that the earth was actually sending us a signal, a communication that Gaia understands we're going through a coronavirus epidemic, and was actually giving us the key to the solution, to the healing. And the key was in a crop circle before any scientists in the world began to figure out the next steps. So when we talk about sentient being, we talk about the animals, we talk about the plants, we talk about all sentient life, we need to also just bear in mind that the earth itself is sentient, and that she's actually trying to communicate to us through geometric forms, which is, as we learned from Pythagoras, 2,500 years ago, is the basic building block and communication structure of the universe itself. So
Jeannie?
As we close here, I'd love to hear your comments on the aliveness of Earth and the aliveness of life on Earth, because all of our lives, whether we're an amoeba or a virus or an eagle or a walrus or a crocodile or a human being, we're all alive because the earth has produced us. So we all contain that sentience. And she's doing her best to communicate the obvious to us, but we're proving ourselves to be rather poor learners, at least at a collective level. So Sailesh, maybe you first, and then Anne, speak to the aliveness and the sentience of Gaia.
Yeah, that is a fundamental question, isn't it? It is, it's having faith that there is something much more intelligent than us that's guiding us. That to me is the faith. And then being open to the messages that you get, so that you can respond accurately. We've always had the concept of the earth goddess in Hinduism, mother goddess in Hinduism, and this is probably why the indigenous communities, seem to resonate with the Hindu thought. It is having faith and trust that intelligence is there to guide us, and that the intelligence is communicating to us, and that all will be well. So until we realize all will be well, we'll always live in fear. But when we have that faith that things are going to work out, then we start looking for the right actions, the solutions that are right in front of us. See, all the solutions that we need, we already have them. We have plenty of food. So why are people going hungry? And in fact, the coronavirus, because of COVID-19, the hunger is supposed to double by the end of 2020.
Yeah, already is.
It's already increased by 50% in the US. So why is that even acceptable to us? Do we not know how to solve that problem? We are actually extracting 6 times as much food as we need from the planet. So people are going hungry, and the food is being fed to animals, so that animals are being fed to rich people. There is something wrong with that equation, what we are doing, you know. So this is why I think it is communicating. The intelligence is communicating to us, saying that you have all the solutions you need. You just have to put it together. And when we put it together, we will start doing the right thing. Which is what you are doing here, you know, with Humanity Rising. You are trying to get this solution to come out.
And what would you say? Speak to us about Gaia, the aliveness of Gaia.
Well, I think there's no question that, I mean, Lovelock has proven that Gaia is an organism, not a mechanism. That's the first thing. But also we mustn't forget that Gaia is part of the planetary system, and the planetary system is part of the whole cosmos. So we're not disconnected, so to speak. It may be that Gaia wants to evolve and wants us to evolve as part of it, so that we live a conscious life on the planet instead of an unconscious life, which we've been doing. And that means that other planetary systems are trying to probably get in touch with us. In fact, I'm sure they are, wanting to help us. And those crop circles don't come from within the Earth. They're imprinted on the Earth by some method that we don't understand, some method from another dimension, which just goes like that. And the crop circle grain is pushed in a certain direction in a certain way. And these patterns then appear. But it's the cosmos working in harmony with Gaia to bring the messages of these crop circles to us and say, look, pay attention. These are messages. They're not just pictures on the ground, so to speak. And I think that when looking back on my life, I'm now 88, and looking back in the last 40 years, there has been an extraordinary transformation in human consciousness already, partly through the feminist movement, partly through the events, the Cold War, and then the aftermath, partly through all sorts of things. But there has been already a huge transformation in which we are ready to take the steps that Sailesh is advising. We're prepared, in many millions of us, not many thousand, but millions already. There's an organization called Avaz, which has 49 million people subscribing to it and is activated, as for instance, with the Beirut crisis. It will gather money to send to people in Beirut from those 50 million or whatever, these people who are belonging to it. So that is a change. That's collective action, which is capable of taking place. And that is Gaia too. It's the intelligence of Gaia working through our intelligence to say, we have to help these people. We have to gather money to send to them. We have to do this, that, or the other. So all this intelligence is communicating in all sorts of ways. Lines of connection are being created, new lines of connection, totally new. And that is a wonder, I think. That's something to celebrate. And you have been so instrumental in that, Jim. You should take a medal for what you've done. Definitely, because you've trusted your own instinct to do this and your intuition, and you've gathered all these people together. And every day there is a new revelation, really. I've listened to a few, but not all, but they've been revelations of what people are capable of doing. And that is Gaia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the intelligence of the trees, the plants, and the animals, and everything, and the humans all working together to bring this about, this new revolutionary change in our consciousness.
Well, that leads me to my final question to both of you that came from Kate Haber. Given the fact that we're poor collective learners, clearly, how might we improve our understanding rapidly, given the nature of the emergency that we're in? So based on what you both know, given our situation, what would you say we need to do to improve our understanding of reality rapidly?
And okay, I'll take that. I the first thing we need to do is to get into conversations with each other. We have this wonderful medium that we are on now, in which not just 4 of us, but 10 of us, 20 of us could be having a very rich conversation in which we exchange ideas, exchange wisdom and knowledge, and get aha moments for each one of us. Okay, we get aha moments when we hear others talk. And then we can have multiple such conversations happening simultaneously. And we can have then artificial intelligence that goes and tells you, hey, you may be interested in that conversation. This is the Google of artificial intelligence that tells you maybe you can best serve humanity by going and having a conversation in that room. Make a suggestion to you. And these are technologies that we have now. We can create such tools, just like we created Zoom, that seamlessly connects us across the world so that we can have a conversation like that. And it's about throwing that open to others so that you can see some fresh perspectives. So right now it's more, we have more of a sages on stages type of conversation happening, but we need more people having conversations too, getting together and saying, oh, I know that this particular plant will do that you're looking for, which people with, I have a lot of computer knowledge, a lot of book knowledge. I don't have that kind of knowledge. I depend on indigenous communities to teach me that. So there is so much that we have to interact with each other, to learn from each other. And we have the medium and the technologies to do that today that we didn't have even 10 years ago. So I think the time is ripe for this transformation to occur. And it is making sure that we are doing everything in the service of this transformation, in service of the whole, for the good of the whole. So if it is being done for someone's profit, it's not going to align with what we want.
Thank you, Sailesh. Thank you. Anne, final word.
Final word. Well, I think that what is happening now, we will have events which push us in the direction we're meant to go. And if we watch the synchronicities, when synchronicities happen, it means we're on the right track. So we should notice the synchronicities that are happening, who we're meeting, who's talking, who's exchanging what ideas. And I think we have the technology now to connect all over the world with everyone that we want to, and bring groups together. Is already happening. I've been watching through a series called The Time of the Sixth Sun, which we're moving into this new era, which was predicted by the Mayans. We're just entering into it now. So there will be events which will push us, impel us to do what Sailesh has told us, to change our whole behavior and to look at different ways of looking at everything, learning different kinds of science. I think I've sent you things on different educational methods in Finland and Estonia, which are much more connected to life in nature for children. They're brought up in nature. And that is something we could change, our educational systems. Parents could say, I don't want my child to be brought up as an automaton, learning all these things. I want him to be out in the woods, learning about plants and trees and everything. There are many changes that could be made. Not perhaps in my lifetime, but in the lifetimes to come. And also death needs to be addressed. We do not die when we die. And that has been a taboo subject. Nobody's talking about death now, even though so many people are dying. But if people could be reassured there is no death, they move on to other dimensions. We do away with the fear of death, which makes so much of our life frightened and frantic and pushing towards goals and everything. We could drop all that. There are no goals to be achieved. And also when you look at the huge creativity of humanity, all the different things from the people who are emptying the bins to the people who are growing food to the people who are doing internet work. There are thousands and thousands of different skills that we have, which could work together to serve life, as Sailesh said. It all is about service. The whole thing is to change from power to service.
That's as good a final word as I could imagine being offered. It's Not power for the sake of power, everyone. It's power for the sake of service and love of all sentient beings. Thank you both so much. And I think it's just worth noting that as we've been speaking, this is the earth speaking through us. We are earth. We are nature. We are the environment. We are the animals. We are the plants. We are the birds. We are the fish. We are it. And interacting at levels we can't even possibly know or imagine all the time.
Exactly.
We need to treat it very sacredly. That's the bottom line. We all live and exist in sacred space. So thank you both so much. This has been very profound and illuminating. And we'll meet our final time tomorrow, 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. Central European time. And we're going to give the final word before we break to our youth. They're the ones who are at ground zero. They're the ones that are going to reap the whirlwind. They're the ones that are going to inherit the earth, such as it is and such as we bequeath it to them. And we thought it would be appropriate to give them the final say. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. And thank you, Sailesh. We've heard from two wise elders today, everyone. Thank you all so much. See you tomorrow.
Okay. Bye.